I am so excited to introduce you all to my business coach, Megan Mensking. Megan is a 7-figure online business coach for busy, ambitious women who want to grow a multi-6 and 7-figure online coaching business that is simple, sustainable, successful, and so fun they'd even do it if they didn't have to. She is a mom of 3 kids under the age of 5, and Megan started her business in 2014 as a service provider, hit her first 6 figures as a virtual assistant, launched courses, and eventually began offering business coaching and consulting. Megan's specialty, and I can attest to this, is helping her clients take big, bold action while embracing the season of life that they're in. And she does this primarily through her iconic mastermind program, which I am a part of. I am so excited to bring Megan onto the show to talk about how she has built a 7-figure business in 10 years, but more importantly, how she plans to grow her business into a 7-figure business a year business. What I most appreciate about Megan is her love and shove approach to business coaching, and it has benefited me as well. And I'm so excited to share that with all of you as well. Megan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. I am so freaking excited to be here. We talked about this podcast happening. You're doing the damn thing. And I'm so pumped and honored to be one of your guests.
And I am honored as well. And I truly mean that. I don't know if I ever aspired to have a podcast or wanted to have one, but you were certainly one of the main reasons why this has come together. And I remember, I think it was in October or November of 24, we talked about the podcast and it coming to fruition. And we had talked about it a little bit. And one of the things you said was, Lyndsey, just launch it. And now it is here. Yeah, I love your love and shove of how you show it for people like me. So thank you for loving and shoving me and getting us here, because I've already gotten such great feedback. I've already gotten a lot more social content that is easier. So I really foresee this being a vehicle and a mechanism that I can continue forward in business, because the whole reason that I came across you was from YouTube. And Megan, it was 4 or 5 years ago. I had just started my business, and I'm sure I was searching how do I be more efficient? How do I create content? What should my content calendar look like? Here are the tech and the tools and the software and also the mindset. And that is how I came to know about you. And I never even followed you on Instagram until maybe a year and a half ago, which is kind of wild, but it highlights to me the importance of playing the long game and longevity in business and just continually showing up. So I have been a lurker in your world. And even as recent as last night, I realized I still don't know half the things that I thought I knew about Megan, just because you've put out so much content over the years. So how does it feel to be 10 years in business and still prioritizing these channels that you've been on for so long and growing your business that way?
Yeah, well, it's been a journey, as I say all the time. I mean, I just hit my 11-year anniversary in January, and I started the YouTube channel not quite 10 years ago. I think maybe the first video that was public was 2015, 2016. I think it was 2016, so almost there. And it is an interesting platform. And I think you mentioned I've done a lot of content. I think what's really important to just set the foundation and the tone of going into this for anyone who hasn't met me before or hasn't been in my world is none of it's been consistent. I haven't been consistently doing weekly videos on YouTube this whole time. I go through kind of seasons with it, and not even pre-planned seasons of 8 drops here and then no more. But the reason I bring this up is because I think there's a really big misconception with content, with playing the long game, that it's not worth it unless you're doing it perfectly, unless you're doing it consistently. And YouTube in particular is such a forgiving platform. You do not have to post consistently to grow, and especially when you're using it to be a business owner, not to be an influencer, then it really doesn't matter. I have people nowadays, some of my highest level mastermind clients, or I found you from a YouTube video, just the same story that you shared. And it's really interesting to still get sales from digital products from a 2016 video. And just the lifetime of it is very different than Instagram and very different than other platforms, which is why I'm such a huge advocate for it. And just long form content in general is such a long lasting, high leverage way to spend your time.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you pointed out, sure, it might look like it's consistent, but everything is a season, everything is a journey. And I think we're going to talk a lot about that today. You and I share a similar story of having left corporate and pursued entrepreneurship, but for you, that was in 2014. Can you talk about what spurred you from working in a traditional setting to doing business on your own?
I think I always had an interest in content creation, even when I was in college and it was, 2011 era. It was kind of the OG bloggers,
Yeah.
This is like, I think the first blogger I can ever think of, her name's like Rach Parcell. She's like a big Mormon Instagrammer now, but like she was the first fashion blogger I ever remembered finding. And I think since then, I was always interested. I had a little blog. I don't even count that in my like time of my business. I was always interested in it. And I was the kid back in the Neopets days who had like a Neopets website. Like your girl's been a nerd the whole time. So I think there was always a part of me that was interested in web design, in the internet, in creating things virtually. But I always thought I was going to be a C-suite corporate person. I kind of always thought that would just be a hobby or a thing on the side. Especially back then, it wasn't really anyone's career yet. So it was kind of just this fun creative outlet for me that, who knew it would end up here. But I was all in on corporate HR. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be head of HR. I'm going to be a COO. I'm going to go to the top, little old me, HR associate, bottom of the totem pole. I quickly realized that I didn't like being told not necessarily what to do, that was part of it, but the smallest thing about like asking for PTO. I'll never, I have two older sisters who are in different seasons of life. I was new to my job and they were having babies and they didn't live in the same city. And I had to ask for PTO to go be with my sister and her newborn baby. And there were just a couple of those moments back to back. And each time was like, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to ask for permission. I want to be able to go do what I need to go do. And I think that little rebellious part of me was like, I don't know exactly what the timeline's going to be on this, but I'm going to start trying to figure something out. And so I ended up starting actually doing graphic design, funny enough, when I launched in 2014. But I was like, I'm good at art. I like creative stuff. I can design a website. I've been doing it for years. And let's just start there and see where it goes. But yeah, the internet's a different place since then. But I was able to actually quit my job a lot faster than I thought I was going to be able to as well, which was, of course, really exciting. And in a season of life where I felt like it was easy to take the risk because I was single, I rented an apartment, expenses were incredibly low. So I think it was also a really good timing moment for me as well.
Yeah. And what I understand is you started out in the graphic design space, led into the VA space. And like you said, you've been in the online space for upwards of 10, 11 years now, which I have to imagine there is a level of like whiplash that comes with that roller coaster. So you shifted into graphic design, VA services, and today you are a 7-figure business coach. Walk us through the seasons and chapters of how Megan started and where Megan is today.
How do I do this succinctly, you guys? Basically, like you said, started as graphic designer, realized that I didn't like doing art for other people. Again, these little realizations we're having, right? Where you're like, oh, doing art's fun for me, but doing it when someone else has to like it was different. And so I kind of discovered right around then online courses. The very first online course I bought was from Mariah Cause, who is now like one of my best friends. And we ended up working together for years on and off. But I bought her course, Your First 1K, which is like grow your email list to 1,000 people, make your first $1,000 online. And the techie part of me was having so much fun answering other members in the same community, answering their tech questions. They were like, oh, well, how do I set up MailChimp? And I was like, blah, 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 let me tell you. And Mariah was actually the one who reached out to me and was like, hey, you're really good at answering these questions in the community. Can I pay you to do it? And I was like, yes, absolutely, you can.
100%.
And it was kind of my introduction into virtual assistants and that this exists. And then specifically in that era at this point, I think it was early 2015, the tech VA was not a thing that existed. Virtual assistants kind of existed, but there wasn't this like specialization that was really happening. And it was very clear as soon as I was like, oh, I'm really good at tech. I can do your website. I can do your email. I can do some light graphics. I can do these things. I quickly got booked out within like less than 2 months. I was booked out considering I had a full-time job. So that was
still when you had the full-time job.
Yeah. So I still had my full-time job and I was just doing this, in the evenings or on the weekends, or I was taking a sales call during lunch break. And and I quickly got booked out for what my capacity was. But it was really interesting because I felt like I was kind of accidentally pioneering a specialization of virtual assistants, which you look back on, you're like, man, the good old days of the internet when it was just all so new. It was crazy. But that's kind of where that started. And I was doing the VA thing when I quit, was able to quit, increased client capacity, and made up, the difference in my salary pretty quickly, hit 6 figures for the first time. And from being a VA to quitting my job, it was like less than a year. So it was a really rapid transition, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then the journey just went from there. Started doing webinars, started doing courses, started like co-coaching in some of my clients' programs, realized I just freaking love coaching, and really spent a lot of time just being an assistant coach within my clients' programs. And it grew from there. Started doing online business management, project management, raising my rates, reducing clients, establishing my own brand. Some of my first courses were like Squarespace in one weekend, Asana HQ, simple online business setup, just kind of these classic tech-oriented, trainings. And then eventually shifted into productivity coaching specifically, where I feel like things on the coaching end really took off for me, where I went from being like a technical systems strategist into an actual coach and thought leader. And so that was in the, to me, the peak of that was in the 2019 era for me.
And that had to have been when I began following you, because whenever you said productivity, I was like, oh, that's what I was looking for. That's what I was searching for. And that's how I found you. And what I love about your story, Megan, is you start from the level of doing. And I mean like doing all the things. And it's your skill and you're so good at it. And every effort has compounded over the years, and you've been in the right circles, you've been in the right programs, you've invested in mentorship, and your business has grown and scaled and pivoted. And I won't even pretend to know how many times you've pivoted.
I don't know if I know.
So the notion that you have backlogged all of this knowledge and experience and relationships is what I assume lends to your success today.
Yeah, it's absolutely a compounding effect there. And I think it's interesting too, we haven't even gotten to the latter part where I took a 2-year sabbatical and closed all my stuff down and did the whole thing, came back, did coaching. But because I've been now in the online marketing space for this long, I call myself an like internet grandma. And even though obviously the internet was around slightly before this era we're talking about, kind of in my mind, I'm thinking about like the online marketing era of the world of the business side. And I now can see the patterns. You can kind of at this point see, we talked about YouTube already. Things like YouTube and SEO and blogging don't really go away. There's fads and there's trends and there's new things and there's things that go away. And you can kind of start to distill down the elements of business that you don't need to recreate the wheel. Where you're like, you know what, this does work, and sure, it evolves, but these are the foundations that are high ROI, high leverage, make an impact. And then these are the things that kind of come and go and are easy to get distracted with, are easy to fill up all your time with, but don't really add to the compounding effect in the same way as some of these longer term, longer game strategies do. So it's been interesting. And you just see the cycle now where people are like, oh, Instagram's dead, Instagram's back, YouTube's dead, YouTube's back, Pinterest is dead, Pinterest is back. Oh, no one wants a group coaching program. No one wants a course. There's just so much noise. And I think it is helpful now at this point, I think, to be finding not only my own way, but to be able to see through it and to be like, okay, here's none of that's real. Here's actually what I want to do based on my strengths and my gifts, and realizing that that's really how we should be designing our businesses is based on your own strengths and the season you are in versus what all the noise is telling you to do.
Yeah. And I think you do really good deciphering the noise. And it's something that like people like me struggle with, who want to conform to a certain framework or want to do, like, you see other people's success and you want to model it in a way. And it's you're very intuitive, and I am trying to find more of my like business intuition instead of looking at what other people do well and then making that my own. And I think I find it so interesting that you had done this for so long, and there are a lot of like personal challenges that you have had individually as family, and it brought you to the point where you said, okay, I'm ready for a little break. So can you talk about that decision to take a sabbatical, what spurred that, and then returning from that to your sabbatical?
when I was doing the productivity coaching is when I feel like my business had this, crazy momentum. I actually started hiring full-time employees. My group coaching programs were scaling like crazy. I had my one, it was called Empowered CEO. It was just like growing and everything was working. I had YouTube, I was doing the podcast, and I was on the personal front having multiple miscarriages. We're trying to grow our family and having multiple miscarriages. We don't know why. And so that was kind of happening behind the scenes. On the facade, things look perfect, but behind the scenes, starting to feel really lost and confused. In 2020, I guess, we had tried doing fertility treatments. We had just, been doing all this stuff. And I was just at a moment where I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Why is this happening so much? I was like, I don't even think I want to be a mom anymore. Like, forget it. And then we got surprise pregnant with who ended up being Kelly, our firstborn. And the whole pregnancy was just, I was full of anxiety. And I feel like my energy towards business, things that whole, the year that I was pregnant with her, 2020, COVID happens, all this stuff is happening, the world is changing. I feel like I was still just really consuming myself with business to just kind of avoid the anxiety and avoid this. And by the time Kelly came in January of 2021, I was so like, it's like, I don't know, I don't know how to articulate it. Becoming a mom is so transformative. And for me, going from 0 to 1 changed me in every way a person can be changed. And so it's hard to say I was burned out going into it or, something was wrong. But I just know that once I became a mom to Kelly, I had a moment where I was like, I don't want to go back to the business I had. I don't want to. I realized that the business I had built in Empowered CEO, we last talked about my journey. I was doing productivity coaching. I really shifted into like operational business coaching holistically. And a lot of the work I was doing with my Empowered CEO clients was like really challenging team stuff, firing people, hiring people, really high stakes in a lot of ways behind the scenes coaching. And when it was time to come back to my clients, I had a moment where I was like, I don't think I have the capacity to take on other people's issues right now. And I just don't think I have it in me anymore. And I felt like a whole new person and I didn't know what that meant for my business. And I was just like, I don't even know. Like, I don't want to be stressed. I don't want to be burned out. I realize now that's where I was. And so I had just a real talk with myself and was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so instead of coming back from maternity leave and like hit the ground running with a launch and like doing all the things I thought I was going to do, I actually entered a transitional period of sunsetting my program and letting go of my employees and really, taking it down. And at that time, Mariah Cause, who I mentioned earlier, she and I had worked back and forth, over the years. She had become a friend of mine. And I remember messaging her and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know this isn't what I want to do anymore. I wish I just had like a part-time job. Like I was like, where my head is right now is I really just want to plug in and do what I'm really good at and then unplug. And I don't feel like I can do that with my business. And she was like, well, I need an operations director. Do you want to come on? And I was like, absolutely. So it was kind of this synergy of just like, I didn't know what I was doing with the business thing. And I got presented with truly this perfect opportunity of a way to still be in an entrepreneurial space, making the impact I want to make, but not having to do everything, not having to be the face to generate the sales and deliver, but to really just plug in on the behind the scenes stuff and co-coach, which I really love doing. So it worked out really well for that season. And that was kind of how my sabbatical from my business began, was working for her part-time. And that all evolved, which we can dig into or not. But it was definitely this moment that I look back on with gratitude that I was able to make that transition. But also I think part of why that was so hard for me and why I ended up taking the sabbatical was because at that time I didn't have a support system of mom entrepreneurs. And it's hard to say, would I have done something different? I don't know. Don't regret the journey. But I know that I didn't have anyone to talk to who was a mom business owner who could tell me that what I was feeling was normal, or, hey, you're 8 weeks postpartum, chill out, like, hey, you might just be real, like, that's normal to feel this way. Just like take a beat, take a longer maternity leave, So it's one of those things that I think it really highlighted to me the importance of community with mom entrepreneurs specifically as a mom, and really created this desire for me to create that. And nowadays most of my clients are moms. It's not exclusively moms by any means, but it is a really special space where I think you can say, you know, my kid is sick, or school is closed, or it's a snow day unexpectedly, or my kid didn't sleep, and people get it, and they get what it means, and they get what it's like when you're going through, you know, trying to get pregnant and being pregnant and postpartum, and someone who can just be a sounding board that's like, hey, like, you're good. This is normal. Anyways, so that was, I think, part of why I am where I am now is that I see how much I needed that support then, and I didn't have it. So who knows what would have happened otherwise. I'm so grateful for where I landed and taking that opportunity. But it really highlighted to me why I wanted to create a space where that kind of support existed. And I'm so grateful that it does now.
And so many of us are grateful that you did as well. I'm one who benefits from your coaching, teaching, and programs. I think that's why this podcast is so important, because there are women like you and I who were climbing corporate ladders and envisioned ourselves in the C-suite corner office leading organizations and being really, really good at what we did. And regardless of that timeline of shifting to entrepreneurship, motherhood changes you in ways that you don't expect. And there are identity challenges. There are productivity challenges. Like, everything shifts, and as much as you try to research and be prepared and like absorb what's about to happen to you, you don't know how it's going to affect you and how your life is going to transform through that journey into motherhood. And that was the case for me. I understand that was probably the case for you in similar and different ways, but understanding that the other side of, and maybe not the other side, but the journey through motherhood is finding what works for you, surrounding yourself with community, aligning yourself and your values, whether current or changed or evolved values, how to continue plugging in and pivoting in a way that honors the seasons that you're in. So after your sabbatical, I know business shifted for you and it continues to evolve. But one of the milestones that you reached recently that we kind of celebrated and you celebrated and we got to celebrate with you is after 9-10 years in business, you hit the cumulative revenue goal of $1 million of lifetime business revenue. Yeah. Which that deserves celebrating, because I think it's so easy to get caught up in the sale, the launch, the year, and be either bogged down or reinvigorated through each kind of roller coaster that happens. So $1 million in lifetime revenue is insane. And you've also set forth a goal in 2025 and beyond to continue evolving that revenue. So can you talk about what 2025 looks like for you now that you've reached $1 million and what comes after that?
Yeah, well, before we even dig into that, I do just want to say, with the celebrating of hitting that revenue milestone, I actually had like a ton of mindset baggage around the idea of celebrating it at first, because when you compare your journey to all the sexy stories out there of people who make $1 million in revenue, like the first 6 months in business. And, you know, I hear all those stories too. And so there was this duality for me of really grounded, genuine, like wanting to celebrate it and share it and making it a big deal. But also, like, in the act of celebrating it, I had to address any of that comparison that was there for me of like, is it almost embarrassing that I'm just now hitting it after being in this for so long? You know, we all have the mindset stuff. And so I just wanted to acknowledge too that, like, I am so grateful I celebrated it, because it forced me to address some of those things head on. And it really taught me a valuable lesson. One of those lessons you kind of learn over and over again in different ways of, like, the thing that you think might be bad or different about you or your journey or your story is actually the thing that makes you special, that you should really double down on. Because I found that by sharing my story of, like, it took me 10 years and I pivoted and I took a 2-year break. And, like, by sharing that it took that long to hit that milestone, but through a lens of still celebration and gratitude and momentum, I had so many people who were like, they related to that, and it gave them hope, and it allowed them to address their own comparison in their own journey. And then even now it's, you know, things like with YouTube. I'm talking about YouTube a lot more nowadays than I think I have in the past year or two, for a reason. But I had my own who am I to talk about YouTube when I haven't been consistent? But the fact is that that's part of why I should talk about it, because I'm an example of how powerful a platform like that can be without requiring consistency. And so now when I talk about YouTube, I actually get to share a more unique and relatable perspective, and honestly, like a more compelling argument, for lack of a better word, about doing something like that, because you can still see the benefit without the consistency. And so I think everyone can apply that in different ways, but it's definitely been this celebrating the $1 million, talking about YouTube, whatever it is. There's such a lesson to be learned, and the thing that maybe you feel ashamed of or embarrassed by, or like you have to fix or is wrong, 99% of the time is actually the thing you should be like leaning into and embracing, instead of trying to conform to what everyone else is putting out there.
And please hear me when I say that that is so impactful for women, particularly women who have started their business after becoming a mom, because there is this comparison. And there's someone in my industry who I look at and I'm just like, look at her go, look at what she's built. And she built much of that before she became a mom. And I have to remind myself and keep in the context of my bandwidth, my mental health, my husband is currently gone for 3 weeks. Like, life looks different for me than it does for other people. And therefore, my desire to strive or my ambition to make X revenue, I need to pivot that myself. I can remember filling out the Iconic application, sitting at my computer and being like, okay, let me just like tell Megan where I am, where I want to go. And also acknowledge that my business is not where I want it to be or where I thought it would be. But that's why we're talking about mentorship and investing in programs and things like that. So thank you for sharing the vulnerable side of, and you've been exposed to very successful, transformational business leaders in our space who are making millions of dollars a year. And what I assume that vulnerability had to have been like when you're like, all right, I've hit 1 million. It took me a while. But again, in cultivating your community, it lends to fostering an environment that is free of judgment, that is empowering, and allows people to share without shame.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's the goal. That's the goal, is to just be like, it may sound cliche or whatever, but true, just embracing your own journey. I can't tell you, in the years I've been doing business coaching, how so many conversations boil back down to that, of like, when we cut through all the things that we think is going on and why we're doing things and why we're stuck, it's like so much of the time it comes back to, we think we're supposed to be somewhere else. So we feel all these things about it that are causing this huge ripple effect of, how you act different or think different or self-sabotage or whatever. And so I'm grateful to be able to demonstrate that and help others hopefully work through that. And then I know you originally were asking too about, 10 years to 1 million, what's happening now in 2025. I'm a big believer and fan of setting crazy ambitious goals. I totally hear the argument of like why you should not do that. And I think that's one of those moments of self-awareness and know, where do you get drive and momentum from? For me, maybe it's my Pisces sun talking, but I love the big. Like, I want to see the biggest goal possible, the thing that's like anyone would be like, you're delusional. And I'm like, that, yes, I am. In fact, that's what I'm tapping into. And so, it takes 10 years to make 1 million. In 2025, my goal is to 10x and make 1 million in 2025. Now, that's a big leap. So is it quote unquote realistic or not? I don't fucking care, because I also have a detachment to the actual timeline, because time doesn't matter. It's not real. So it's more about just like, that's where we're playing, and that's the caliber of decisions we're making. So I'm not making decisions to make 100K in a year or 200K in a year or whatever. I'm making decisions that are 10x that of, does this choice even make it possible to make 1 million in a year? And if it doesn't, it makes the decision making so much easier, because I'm not sitting here just trying to take one baby step at a time, making minor adjustments. It's like, well, this doesn't add up to that. Or, oh, well, this is taking away from my ability to do that. And it really shines a light on the gaps that you have. It really shines a light on where you're wasting your time or where your time could be better spent. And so to me, the first part of 2025 and the end of 2024 has been this, not even like an audit, there's not like a formal audit happening, but there's definitely been this like continual thing of like, does this allow me to do 1 million in a year? And it doesn't. So what needs to evolve? What needs to change? What has to adjust? And And so for 2025, it's been a lot about embracing the season of life, which I've been talking about with my clients for a while now, but I'm realizing there's more to it than that. It's not just like, oh, it's okay, understand where you're at. Like, it's not just the self-compassion side of understanding and embracing the season you're in. It's actually seeing business strategy through a different lens and creating your own, not even story, but like understanding what actually suits your season of life. So for example, I had this story that evergreen sales was better for the season of life that I'm in. Oh, yeah, right. People can just join whenever. I can just be doing things here and there and people are coming. That's what I should be doing. And I'm not anti-evergreen sales by any means. But, in my mind, in that narrative, launching would be quote unquote bad for this season of life or hard for this season of life. Still would do it. But it was this idea that that's going to be hard for me to do as a mom, or that's going to be hard to do in this season. But what I've really realized is that actually in this season, launching is so much better for me because I don't have to be thinking about evergreen sales every fucking day. I don't have to be thinking about pitching here and pitching there, and I should do this and I should do that, because the game of evergreen sales is it's never enough. You're never done. You can always do another funnel, another this, another post, another automation. You can always do another Instagram story. You could always tweak that messaging a little bit more. And I think that's where it's also easy to get caught up in the month. How much did I make this month versus how much am I making in the grand scheme of things and what's my trajectory? And so for all of those reasons, I think there's been a big shift for me in realizing that actually launching suits me better. I love to come in and hyper focus on a project and then step away from it. And launching really allows me to do that, and it anchors in all of my actions into a clear purpose, which reduces overthinking. And I can come in and do the thing, and then I can just focus on my clients. So that same thought process applies to YouTube versus Instagram for me. And so there's kind of this deeper application of embracing the season you're in to mean more than just self-compassion, but also actually looking at business strategies you're doing and saying what actually suits the season of life you're in. And maybe for you, it's not launching. Maybe for you, that isn't what works for you. But does that make sense on this like deeper shift of embracing the season you're in?
Well, yes, it does. Your visual representation that I watched in your YouTube video last night was highly impressive.
Yeah. My doodles, my iPad doodles.
I loved your iPad doodles because one of the things that you included in this video that I watched is you put 12 squares on your iPad, and that represented your calendar. And what you did, and you guys should go watch this because the visual is really, really helpful, but you put, okay, my kids are going to have Christmas break here, and they're going to have spring break here, and they're going to be home on summer break here, and then we've got birthdays here, da-da-da-da-da. Here's how my personal life is going to dramatically impact my business and my bandwidth, and certainly perhaps that ability to focus on things. So what I believe you did was say, okay, January is really, really good for me. July, maybe not, but May, pretty solid. So that I assume you're planning big launches around those time frames, and taking mentally the load out from always on, always striving, and focusing on what I believe you called like heavier lifts in certain amounts of time, and being really thoughtful about that. So yes, it makes sense to me because I definitely watched the video last night. And I think it's empowering because, like I've shared, being able to pull yourselves out of the day-to-day and look at what everyone else is doing and what I don't think it's even intentional. And I'm speaking for myself. Like, I'm not intentionally trying to like match the framework and the strategy of other people, but in my brain, subconsciously, it's like, this is how it's done. I should do it that way, instead of pulling out of that and saying, this is what works for me, and this is what I need to do to move forward in order to achieve the goals, whether financial or otherwise, in your business.
Yeah. Because if you're just listening to everyone else, you're going to hear every contradiction in the world. And what you've shared too, I've felt that way before too. And I think there's a sweet spot there. I think mentorship and courses and programs are there to support us, to help us not recreate the wheel, to not have to start from scratch. But I think in terms of applying strategies, it's much better for everyone to take what you're seeing and take what you're learning and do a little self-filtering there. And maybe you try it out exactly as they teach it, but you don't just like let it be there and it worked or it didn't. You say, what part of this is working for me and what part of this isn't? Because I have, one of my best friends over here is like, hates calls, asynchronous only. If I was trying to do business that way, and I have before, I'm unfulfilled, and that's where everyone's different. I am fulfilled by literally being on calls. I love being on calls with people. That is where I thrive and where I feel like my gift of coaching can be most evident versus sitting there just pre-recording content all the time. And so, again, where's the sweet spot there? But if I was just only listening to people who said, do less calls, do no calls, the goal is no calls, the goal is an empty calendar, 100% empty, then I would be thinking something is wrong with me and I would be trying to change me versus saying, no, I do like doing calls. And yes, I have to do them within a scope and a boundary and a schedule that's real, but it doesn't mean I have to not do them at all. It means I get to figure out how I want to do them and how to make it purposeful and have boundaries around it. But it's not that there's something wrong with me, that I like doing it that way.
And one of the things that I think you're pretty well known for, at least in this current stage of business, is that you average around 15 hours of work a week, and you've made six figures, probably made multiple six figures. I will assume that the boundaries that you have, the structure you have, and the discipline you have lends to that being possible. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, none of it would be possible without childcare. So I always got to throw that out there, because in the moments where I haven't had childcare, my nanny is sick or school is closed or whatever, I get basically nothing done. And it's incredibly frustrating and challenging to find focus work in that moment. And so if you are listening to this and that is your situation, there are so many things you can do to work with that. But I also know that is so hard, and you are incredible. So shout out to everyone who's in that season, because I know hearing someone's block schedule when you're like, I don't have a block schedule, is really annoying. Okay, so I get it. So number one, this is possible for me because I have childcare, which allows me to have focus work blocks that isn't just after bedtime or just during a nap or on the weekend. So that's huge for me. But with that in mind, like you said, 15 hours a week is like a dream week for me. It's usually far less than that right now. I think especially I have 3 kids now under the age of 5. And the amount of lifing just continues to amplify week over week, it feels. And so there's definitely even less of that. Even when I have the childcare, no one is sick and the nanny is here, there's still, I had to take my dog to the vet. She suddenly has an autoimmune disorder and has to go to the vet, multiple times a week. Okay, well, I'm the primary person who runs our house, who takes care of things around here. That's on me. And I'm happy for that to be my role for our family, but it takes a priority. So that's going to happen. I've committed to working out more, and we have a personal trainer right now. So that's happening. Oh, it's Valentine's Day. Got to go grab some stuff for the kid. All of that stuff is on me. And in my little 15-hour block of free time between school drop off and school pickup, and don't like to do work on Fridays, and here's my workouts. It's way less than that now. And there's all these variables. And that's when I take the kids to the doctor when someone's sick, or when it's their annual appointment, or I need to go do something, right? So all that to say, it's evolving a little bit right now, because truly, since having the third kid, who's 6 months old now, it's hit another level of life is lifing. And even the block schedule I feel like I had a year ago does not really apply in the same way right now. And so number one, having the childcare helps, because it just gives me some kind of time to do what I want. The second thing here is I'm absolutely with boundaries, specifically because I know that's what you asked for. There's a sense of boundaries within how I serve my clients that I have to find my own sweet spot with. In terms of, so I do some coaching asynchronously through Telegram or Slack. And so one thing I have to do is really be intentional with when is that happening. And it doesn't necessarily mean it happens the same time of day every day, but in my day, there is a set time where I'm like, okay, this is when I'm going to plug in. And I'm going to be really intentional. I'm going to plug in and do my stuff. And that's it. Or when it comes to calls, if I'm offering a 30-minute call or 60-minute call, I have to be really clear with myself on when's the hard stop, when do I need to wrap it up, and not feeling bad to say, I've got a hard stop, we've got to jump on. And even within group coaching calls sometimes saying, hey, this is supposed to be an hour. So, how do I communicate that expectation up front? How do I manage the call better? And how do I set expectations that we're going to get as much done as we can, and then we're going to log off. But all of these boundaries are made easier because I literally log off of the app and I have no notifications on. So like I'm not getting a Slack notification or a Telegram notification because those are just off. So I really try to restrict myself from even like going in and plugging in and getting potentially distracted or blurring a boundary when I can help it. So I'm kind of rambling about boundaries now. Tell me where I can take this to be a little bit more applicable and what your thoughts are.
No, as you're talking about it, I'm like, oh, our hard stop is about 5 or 10 minutes. So with that being said,
wrap it up.
I have a question that I didn't expect to ask you. I have two questions.
Yeah.
But this is purely based out of curiosity. Do you have an ick when it comes to like online businesses or like trends that you see? What gives you the ick?
Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me in general, I try to be a positive person. So I'm not like
Ditto.
out there bitching about people on Threads or whatever. And if you are, I usually mute you. But I will say in this season of life, my biggest ick is when men who may be dads, but who have a partner that takes care of all the stuff we've already talked about that, you know, I take care of or you take care of, give productivity advice. And they're like, just wake up at 5 a.m. and do this and go to the gym and come home and do this. And to just be aware that there's another support person there that's taking on the brunt of the workload that they are just totally able to not
Disconnect.
worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine if that's their dynamic, right? So I'm not actually judging that dynamic, but my ick is when I see productivity advice that doesn't seem to have that as self-awareness, that's part of it. Or even just people who aren't parents potentially. You know, I used to be a productivity coach before I was a parent. And I look back at it and I'm like, oh, Meg, you know, I had a client then who I helped go through maternity leave. So I know I was able to still really benefit my clients. But you look back and you're like, I really didn't know what I was talking about with productivity advice before I was a mom, you know? Yeah, like I had a video that's like how I wake up early, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, guess what? Who's not waking up early in this season of life? Like me right now, right? So I think that's my ick is just, you know, when it seems, and tone deaf is not the right word, but when there's this lack of awareness of like trying to give advice to people who are in a season of life where it's like, I really can't control all of that. And I really sometimes the narrative, I think, of like, suck it up and do it anyways, even if you woke up 3 times with your kid, I think can actually be harmful. And I even see this from other women coaches who are moms who were like, I was up 8 times last night and I'm still here doing my Instagram posts today. And I'm like, but why do you have to? Can't we just not? Like, can't we just take a break or say we don't need to do Instagram today? And I don't know. Those are kind of my icks right now, as I feel like it's just really dismissive or a lack of self-awareness.
Yeah. I've been trying to reinforce to like people in my space who like my algorithm will show me these like young single guys who are like go ghost mode for 6 months. And I have to tell people, I'm like, hey, mom of 3 over there, he's not talking to you. He's not talking to you. That's not for you, babe. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Totally agree. The other business question that I have that I think would be so fascinating for you to answer before we shift over to more of a personal, like how you manage things personally and like mindset wise, is in 2025, online business looks way different than it did when you started in 2014 after COVID. It is constantly evolving. So I'm curious if you have advice for people in the online space, like what's coming in 2025 and how can people prepare and prioritize for succeeding in this era?
Yeah. I think it's funny. In a lot of ways, it actually feels like we're coming back to some of the things that used to be a bigger deal. And so I think it's always funny doing trend reports or predictions because, you know, you never know. But I feel like what I'm noticing and what I'm predicting for the future is the resurgence of long form content becoming a priority again. I think not only from potentially the TikTok ban that, you know, may or may not happen, but I think people are realizing that they are tired of short form content because even when the TikTok ban was that like one day where we had the ban actually happen, everyone was like, oh, I'm not going over to other short form content. I'm actually just going to like go to podcasts or YouTube or long form. And so I think there's a bit of a craving for long form again. And I think whether that's YouTube or podcasting or blogging, I think we're going to see a refocus on those platforms, both from creators as well as consumers. And I think blogging in particular is going to be something that becomes more important, because I find that a lot of people, when they're seeking answers, they don't always want video anymore. You know what I mean? I think the video is a big part of it. Obviously love YouTube, but there are times where it's like, I just want to skim a blog post and I'll watch the video if I like what I see in the blog post and I want to go deeper. So I feel like we're going to kind of return to some OG, like, you have to know your shit. You can't just do a little Instagram carousel post and, you know, pretend to know everything. You got to actually like prove that you know what you're talking about, and a resurgence of content that actually helps people. Because I think in the short form space, it's so easy to kind of be in this activation mode. I'm going to activate you and motivate you, and you should be doing this, and here's the story. And there's a place for that for sure. But I think that is a short-term impact. Whereas being able to, someone's like, how do I actually manage my time as a mom and a business owner, and a piece of content on that someone can actually take action on, is going to be such a more impactful experience for both parties and have a higher ROI in the long run. And so I really think we're going to see a trend back to, you know, YouTube, blogging, and then podcasting, I think, has kind of been a mainstay. But I think the YouTube and the blogging piece in particular, I think the era is just, people are savvy now and they just want to know, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You got to prove it. You can't just like sit there and do your shit anymore. And so part of that, I think, also, as well as client results becoming more and more important, and not just the like screenshot blurbs, which are great, but also being able to say like, hey, when Lyndsey and I started working together, she was here and now she's here. And like tracking those results, or being able to share those results. I really think all of it's just about showing you can actually help people, because people need the opportunity to trust you. And if you're only doing short form content, you're not doing podcasting or YouTube or blogging or email marketing or something where there's a little bit more depth, it's really hard for people to get that know, like, and trust with you that's meaningful. So I really think it's coming back to just actually serving people and actually engaging with your people. People reply to your newsletters, actually reply. People comment on your stuff, actually comment back, and not just care about the vanity metrics of it all, but just actually the OG. Like, we built our businesses off the back of community, of just free advice and cheering each other on. And Lyndsey, I think you're so good at this too. You are really good at cheering people on, I think, in their content and in their platform. And I so love the way you do that. And I want to bring more of that back into how I interact online too, because I think that's where we're going. We're coming back to the days of actually helping and actually building relationships with your people. Yeah. And not just trying to get these vanity metrics in eyeballs.
Yeah. Thank you. And in my world, PR, people can really focus on the vanity metrics. And certainly, as you're saying about trust, like, the trust economy is so low right now because people are not showing up authentically. They're using AI in ways that anyone can use AI. And literally, before I had you on, I had a client of mine on this morning, and we are talking about like her transformation and being able to prove that. And so this is evolving to like social proof on steroids, because you do have to prove that you're worth your salt, that you are trustworthy, that you can provide a transformation. And it's good to hear that it is going that way, because I think that's where I get very disheartened in the online space, is that a lot of people are either pretending or aspiring or putting up a front that sounds really good without giving context. And a lot of people gravitate towards that. So the way that you and I operate in business is integrity first, community focused, and not focused on the vanity metrics. And that's really hard to compete with people who are not leading in that way. So thank you so much for sharing that. As we kind of transition into like the brief personal side of this, I think what you do so well is, again, with the like 15 hours of work a week, delegating, holding boundaries, you've really leaned into like filling your cup in this particular stage of life, because you are a mom of 3. You are building $1 million a year business. Like, that cannot be done with a short bandwidth or a lack of mental wellness. So can you talk about what you do to prioritize yourself in the midst of all the things you're prioritizing for everyone else?
Yes, it has absolutely been this really intentional conversation. I realized at the end of 2024 that I had let a lot of that slip. You know, it's not something that just one day it stops. And it's not this extreme thing of like, I was neglecting myself. And it's not that like that extreme, But I had realized that I was like, I'm not really being intentional about any of it. I'm not intentionally thinking about what I'm going to eat. I'm just thinking about what do my kids need from the grocery store? And then it's time for me to eat. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to eat. You know,
There's that
it was
peanut
like,
butter and jelly, that half-eaten peanut butter
well,
and
and then I
jelly.
freaking celiac. So I'm like, I got to have my gluten-free bread. That's not fun. And so I feel like that was a big realization for me, was that I had lost intentionality of taking care of myself in all regards. You know, I always thrive when I have a habit of journaling, not diary style, but like stream of consciousness, decluttering the brain style journaling. And so, you know, I had let that go. I wasn't really working out. I wasn't really being intentional about how I fed myself. I wasn't being intentional about my nighttime self-care routines. You know, it was just this full thing. And so I realized at the beginning of this year, I was like, we're going to reset all of that. And so I think the one single action that has allowed the rest to unlock for me is going to sound so silly, but it is taking a shower as soon as I put my kids to bed. Because I am not the type of person who necessarily like showered every day to begin with, unless I like was sweaty and worked out and did stuff. But I had this moment where I realized that sets the tone for how I spend the next couple of hours of the evening. Because if I put the kids to bed and then just go sit on the couch or try to like grind my way through chores, then I'm like feeling like I'm grinding my way through chores and I just want to sit and I just want to blah. But when I would literally like put the kids to bed and be like, hey, mommy's going to go shower. I'm like, Dad, here's the monitor. I'm officially clocking out right now. And I'm going to go get into a shower where time doesn't exist. And I can just be in a hot shower for 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And just like, I'm not in a rush. And I think that single action has had this huge ripple effect for me, where it's like the kid goes to bed. You know, our oldest goes to bed at like 8:30. So this is still like kind of a later timetable for us, but she'll go to bed like 8-ish. And I'm walking straight to the shower and I'm getting in and I'm just like, time doesn't exist here. And so it can be whatever it needs to be in that moment. And then I get out and of course I feel great because you've showered. And then I do my skincare. So I'm definitely taking care of myself, right? Because it'd be easy for me to skip that. So it's like, okay, like we've taken care of me. I'm in my PJs. I'm in a much better mood. I feel reset. I can come back on and put on some music and do 10 minutes of chores. And the energy around doing it is so different. It's so much lighter. It's so much more like rewarding in a way. And then when it's time to unwind, I don't have to do anything else. My to-do list is done. I'm ready for bed. I'm clean. My house is where it needs to be. And I get to just do whatever I want to do until I go to bed. And that has had this huge mental, you know, now I'm working out because we have a personal trainer and I'm eating better. And like there are these other actions, but on a day-to-day basis, that one change in what I do after I put my kids to bed has had the biggest impact on my mindset and how I feel, and this act of prioritizing myself coming into the other areas.
I can like feel the ambiance that you kind of like channel into
Yes.
at 8:30 every night
Yes.
as the kiddos are in bed and you're like, all right, shuts the door. Maybe there's music, maybe there's not, but like we're in a closed off room and no one's coming in.
Yeah. Well, it makes such a difference. I think, you know, what if you're a parent or you've got people you're taking care of, just, you know, being needed all day, even with work, having clients, you know, you're supporting your clients. And so it's like, you know, you're kind of spending all day fielding everyone else's needs as well as you can. And to just have that like intentional shift of like, now it's my time and I don't have the monitor with me. You've got it. Like, it has worked so well for us. And yeah, I recommend it if you're not doing something similar.
I know very well right now that I'm entering this very not super great period where like you're burning the candle at both ends. Yeah. Like things are just kind of busy. My husband's been gone, the kid, like it's just busy. Yeah. And I know that I'm reaching that point of like, oh, okay, we've got to like scale back and pour into that cup because now we're depleted. And that for me, like that's when I am not the parent that I'm proud of, because I lose my patience. I am not like giving them, like making the dinners that I would like for them to have, or I'm not like providing them the experience that I so deeply want to provide them, because Lyndsey, is not making the decisions that afford that experience. And so I have to like reflect into that. And I think that's the hope that I want to pour into other people, is that like there are women that, I mean, for ages, women are doing the damn thing. They are being great moms. They are being successful, but it's not without hard fought battles. It's not without really being super disciplined in their efforts, both at work and at home. So I'm curious, Megan, as we wrap up today, for someone, maybe either a young mom or someone who wants to be a mom and successful, either in business or in corporate, what advice would you give them if they aspire to be in your shoes one day?
Man, there's so much I could say to that, but I think that the one big thing was this idea of allowing yourself to be misunderstood. And it's not your responsibility to control how other people perceive you. You can only control your actions and your intent behind those actions, and that's it. And I think that single shift will impact how you parent, how you take care of yourself, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your kids. Like, it impacts everything. I was even having a conversation with my husband the other day, and he was kind of feeling bogged down by some stuff. And I was like, well, we just need to not care about that, like we just need to, that's not really something we can control. And he was like, oh, you're right. And so I think it's something we have to remind ourselves of over and over again, whether it's pivoting in business, whether it's, creating content, what is so-and-so going to think, or all the myriad of things that come along with that. Just this self-acceptance that can be so hard to get to, but it kind of has to happen, where you just have to truly accept who you are. The things, we talked about this a little bit earlier already, the things that maybe feel like quirks or faults actually being your magic. It's all connected to this idea of just like, all you can control is you. All you can control is your intention and your actions. And if you're solid in your integrity and your intentions are good, then I fully believe that just showing up and doing what you can do and trusting that the rest will fall where it's going to fall is the game of life. And like, that's it. And if someone else is going to be mad at you, no sweat off my back. You're never going to please everyone. You're not meant to please everyone. And so just please yourself, please the immediate people in your life that matter, and like, let that be enough.
And I think it's hard to get to that place, whether subconsciously or consciously. Like, that is a journey in itself. But I think once you reach that point, and I'm still in my like journey of that personally, but once you get to that point where you are solely focused on yourself, your family, and not giving a crap what someone else thinks of that. And for someone in PR, that's really hard for me. Getting to that place it has to be like a pressure that is relieved, an ease that comes into both your home life and your business. So while I feel like I'm getting there, I really look forward to the day where I'm like, meh, don't care about that perception or don't care about that person's opinion.
I think it's still a journey too, though. Like, I don't pretend to live in a world where check the box, I've mastered that skill and never have to touch on it ever again. I think especially mindset things, loving yourself, like, I picture this like upward spiral where it's like, okay, we've learned the lesson and we're going to come back around. We got to learn it again at a different level. We got to come back and learn it again in a different season, in a different stage of life, in a different context, and just continuing to allow that self-development to happen. And so am I farther along this journey than I was 10 years ago? Absolutely. Is my amount of the amount of self-trust and self-acceptance and not caring about what other people think is astronomically higher than it was even 5 years ago. Since becoming a mom too, right? That notch goes like way up where you're like, peace out. Yeah. But I imagine that continues to grow for me, because there's still moments where you're like dealing with an interaction you're having. You're like, oh no, what are they going to think, right? Or you're pivoting or changing. I hope they like it. And you're kind of just continuing to come back to that point and that conscious choice of saying, you know what, I feel really grounded in my intention here. I feel really solid from an integrity standpoint, and we're going to just do this the best that we can and trust that it will work out and that this is the next step for me, and the step after that will unfold next. And so I think the journey you feel like you're on with Lyndsey, you're just on the journey. We're just all on it together. So
we're on it.
You're on it. We're on it forever. And I think that it's just continuing to have an awareness around it and coming back to it. And I think the biggest step is just being able to notice when that's what's holding you back.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm worried about what they think about me. Then just calling that out and shifting that is the work. And then you're good.
Who's listening, you just got a coaching moment. We all just got a coaching moment from Megan. And I also have a feeling that the upward spiral that you just talked about, that's your next visual for your next YouTube. So I look forward to seeing that on your iPad.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, Megan, can you tell people where they can find you, follow you outside of this podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've talked about it a couple of times. Would love for you to go to my YouTube channel. You can just search Megan Mins King. That's also my handle on YouTube. And would love to have you over there now that I'm doing more frequent videos and my little iPad doodles to walk you through everything business and life and growing a business while being a mom and all those fun things. You can also go to my website, meganminsking.com. And then I do still have my Instagram right now. We didn't touch on this. I'm taking a bit of a break from Instagram at the moment, but it is, a place I probably will go back to stories at least. So Megan Mins King everywhere is where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, Megan, you know how grateful I am for you. So excited for people to hear more of your story and certainly what makes you special in that your boundaries, your priorities, the way you lead, and your mentality as a business owner who has seen so much and done so much, but is going to continue honoring yourself and your gifts and your ambition. What's going to happen for you over the course of the next couple of years. So I'm just pumped and excited to know you and to be part of it. And I know a lot of people are going to be really inspired after they hear this podcast. So thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to sharing it with the world.
Oh, I'm so honored to be one of your guests and to just know you and be in your world and to get to witness you growing the coaching side of your business is such a privilege. And like, you're so good at what you do. And when you share the results you're getting your clients, I'm just like, Lyndsey, come on, let's shout it to the rooftops, please.
We've got to toot our own horn more.
Yeah. You're incredible at what you do. So I'm so grateful to know you and so honored to be on your podcast. And I can't wait to share it too. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you soon.